What's going on, college football fans? Welcome back to the First and Long College Football Show. We sure did miss you guys. Sorry we missed you the last couple of days. We've been having some technical difficulties. It seems as though we've got all that stuff ironed out, and we are so glad to be with you here today. We're going to be talking about, of course, the college football playoff. 'Tis the season, gentlemen, for all that good stuff. We've got our first round ironed out. We've got the whole bracket ironed out. We're here to somewhat react to that and just kind of discuss and kind of put a final bow tie on some of that stuff, Christmas style. And then we're going to talk about the first round playoff games. We may mention the transfer portal a little bit here. We got a lot going on December 12th of the 2024 college football season. Let's get it going. If you're new here to the First and Long College Football Show, welcome. We hope that you will consider hitting the subscribe button. I hope you will consider hitting the like button for us. It helps us out a ton. Get the word out about the good old First and Long College Football Show. It's been a hell of a season hanging out with you guys this year, and we're not done yet. We've got some of the best football still left to play. Mason, how you doing, man? We're ready finally. It's the season seems so short once it gets going, and once it gets gone, it feels like it went by in a flash. But in a way, it feels like it's taken forever to get to this point, and in a way, it feels like it's kind of flown by. How you doing tonight? We've got some of the best football of the year still to talk about. You ready to talk about it tonight?
Yeah, always ready to talk some football. It never ceases to escape my day to day conversations these days. As we've gotten this channel out, it seems like more and more people that I know within my circle call me randomly and just say, "Well, what do you think about this and this?" And
Mm-hmm.
it's become almost a daily thing with people. I had a former coworker called me yesterday, and he called me because he was offering me a job to come back to my old company. But as soon as we started talking, he's like, "Well, what do you think about this playoff, man?" Uh, and I was like, "Well, it's I think they got the right 12 in, but the playoff itself probably needs to change. Like realistically, it's not a perfect system. I like the 12 teams in it. I just don't the 1 through 4, the seeding of 1 through 4 just irks me. Where you've got the conference championships automatically, or conference champions automatically getting the numbers, the 1 through 4 seed. That is what pisses me off. Everything else I'm cool with. I'm even okay with having the 5 top conference champions being in the top 12. But I don't think that they should. The top 4 of those should be seeded 1 through 4, and I don't think anybody does think that. I think as a college football community, we realize that this is not great for the sport, and not to lead us right into that. I wasn't really trying to steer the conversation or segue or transition into our college football playoff talk, but I say that to say a lot of people are talking about these playoffs. Everybody, anybody listening, it's on top of your mind. It's on the top of your neighbor's mind. Everybody wants to know what the future of the playoffs is going to look like. I have reason to believe that as soon as next year, this will change in some way. But we know in 2026, at least, things will change. And I'm starting to wonder now, Mark, based on what you shared with me, and the reporting done by CBS here just a couple of days ago, I'm starting to wonder if the college football playoff is going to change for the better, or are we just are we just looking for change? Right? What's going on with this? Can you tell us a little bit more about this reporting, and what are your thoughts about it all?
Well, Mason, so you bring up, I think, what is the hot button issue as far as this 12-team college football playoff, and that's the automatic buys. And you and I have been against this. We've been starkly against this since the very beginning. I think it's a poor way to seed these teams. I don't see what was ever, you had different conferences worried about different things. Obviously, everybody was out for their own interest. The SEC out for theirs, the Big Ten out for theirs, so on and so forth. And we got too caught up in guaranteeing conferences these bids to the playoffs, I think. And um, you just got to trust that the system is gonna work, right? The ranking of the 12 teams, it is what it is. We can't facts don't love your feelings, right? And the fact of the matter is, the top 12 teams are the top 12 teams. Um, the team to me that doesn't belong in the college football playoff is Clemson. It's not SMU, in my opinion. It's Clemson. The only reason that Clemson is in the college football playoff is because they won that game there at the end of the year that they limped into with 3 losses, right? And they win that game, and it's automatically we got to stick them in there somewhere, you know. And I just don't necessarily agree with that. Now, look, I think everybody more points to the whole SMU side of things and says SMU's the team that doesn't deserve to be there. And there's a case to make for SMU. There's a case to make against SMU. But as far as the college football playoff committee is concerned, they did their job. They took the parameters that were described to them before the season started and were described to everyone, by the way. Every conference, this is what we all voted on. And so the system worked how it was supposed to work. Does it meet mine or your eye? Does it meet our quality control check and balance here? No, it doesn't, because of what you talked about with those automatic buys. So, with all that being said, now there's a story being put out by CBS, the one that you referenced. We talked about it just before we went on air, and kind of in like government form, right? Sounds like something the government would do, like fight legislation with more legislation, right? That's a politician's answer to this. The conference players that be, or the media players that be, because I mean, let's be real, they work hand in hand in this situation, right? It's all about them Benjamins. Their response to this and answer to this was, let's create more automatic bids. And I think that is the absolute wrong direction. They're wanting to basically turn conference championship Saturday into some conference basketball tournament-esque style throwdown at the end of the year. And that is going to require more teams to play that extra game every single week. And I'm not complaining about, or every single year, I'm not complaining about there being more games. That's not my complaint here. That's the number one thing I like about the 12-team college football playoff. But I don't think automatic bids are the way to go. And there's just no way to convince me any differently of that, especially whenever those automatic bids are the 4 highest ranked ones are automatically in the top 4 and have the bye. Like, I just this system is not. This is not how you pick the 12 best teams here. Did the college football playoff committee do their job this year? Yes, they did. They did their job. They did it exactly how they were supposed to do it. Alabama lost to a couple of teams, guys, that were 6-6. Okay, and what I want to be careful with here as a college football fan, as somebody who reports on the sport, somebody who loves the sport first and foremost, we're not burning this whole system down because Alabama didn't make the playoff. That's not the reason we're making changes here, and I don't want a whole fire sale of this system. We need to work the bugs out of the system we got right here before we move on to something completely different and farther into the dark and farther out into left field and farther into the unknown, just to be frank with you, because we don't know what we're dealing with here. We've never done it before. So I think we need to tweak the 12-team system going forward and go forward. I don't think we need to blow the whole system up here. We're on to something decent, but there's just going to need to be tweaks made to it. And however we do it, we need to make sure that we keep conference championships where they are relevant in the sport, because I think they're overall good for the sport. And it's what makes our sport special, guys. I mean, I don't want teams to get to a certain point of the year with 3 games left in college football and they've clinched their division and they're resting all their that's not what we want in college football. This isn't the NFL. So I think there's compromises that need to be made here, obviously. But but I think they did a good job getting the right teams in. I just don't agree with the order, right, Mason? Isn't that essentially kind of where you're at?
Yeah, and I'm not as upset about Clemson getting in. I don't mind there being five. Um, I don't mind them taking the top five conference champions. That's not an issue for me. For me, it's seeding because obviously Oregon just got a terrible shake here, and I think that that's kind of the main reason I'm looking at it. I saw Brian's comment talking about the seeding of Boise State. I never even considered the fact that Boise State got the 3 seed being unfair or anything like that. I mean, it is relative to this conversation,
What
but to
What
me,
was the
it's
final top 25 ranking for Boise State?
we can go back right here. They had them at 9.
Okay, so they would have been in the playoffs either way, but
Yeah, they would be in,
just
but
wouldn't
I
have
mean
the
it's the
bye. And
same argument with Arizona State. They would be at 12 instead of 4. Um, I don't mind the buy. To me, it's not about the buys or anything like that. It's the fact that the number 1 seed in the playoffs got the hardest leg of everybody in the playoffs. Like, what was the point in winning the game against Penn State? If they would have went to 6, then they would have an easier route to the national championship. Now you got to play either Ohio State or Tennessee, and then presumably Texas to get to the national championship. Whereas the number 2 team in the country, Georgia, would have to play presumably Notre Dame and Penn State. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. The easier path here is on the right side of the bracket. It's on Boise State and Georgia's side, and I think that having to structure this the way that they did just kind of ruined the allure of the number 1 seed in this
well,
in
and
this case.
I don't, I don't think it's anything like it's obviously not anything out to get Oregon or out to get Texas or Ohio State or anything like that. I mean, that's just how the numbers worked out here. But that's the whole point. Like, the numbers shouldn't necessarily work out that way. It should just be based on the rankings. You know, I don't know. I don't know any other way to put it. I mean, look, Boise State is going to have their chance, just like Notre Dame's going to have theirs, just like SMU's going to have theirs. Um, it's
Yeah, I
everybody's
mean,
going to
all
have
these
their
teams
chance
have to
here.
win. Yeah, it's um I don't I see Brian's comments. I don't have any issue with Boise being in this at all or getting a bye. I think that moving forward, and if Oregon was your team, you'd be just as upset about Oregon's leg in this. I just think objectively looking at this, I don't see how this is really fair to an Oregon team, who's probably going to still end up in the national championship. At the end of the day, this is football, and you're um, you got to beat the people you're scheduled to play. And Dan Lanning is not shying away from this competition or anything like that. These are going to be very highly viewed games that Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks get to play in. All potentially 3 of them are going to be some of the highest viewed uh, games in all of college football. That only helps the brand of Oregon, and it only helps Dan Lanning in his recruiting efforts when the future recruits that he's going to be going after are watching these big time games. So, who knows? I mean, if they win it all, it's a heck of a gauntlet. But I just think it's fair to point out that nobody's got a tougher gauntlet than Oregon in this one, in my opinion. Maybe you could say Arizona State, probably has it a little bit
Well,
tougher.
Tennessee and Ohio State have the toughest, and then,
That's true. That's true.
and then, or I guess you could say Tennessee, Ohio State, Texas. Those are the 3 that have the toughest. Oregon, they still got the bye week. So they do have that benefit, but. Yeah, no doubt. I mean that 8, 9, and 1 side of this bracket is tough, and that kind of transitions us into what we're here to talk about tonight. We wanted to talk about some of these first round playoff games, and just kind of glancing at this, you can look at the 4 corners of the screen here, and those are your first round games. And you're the lowest seed, obviously, in each of those matchups is going to be hosting these. Um, Tennessee, Ohio State. What an outstanding game. I mean, that we're going to talk about it here in a minute. That is an outstanding matchup. I'm super excited about that one. Indiana going on the road to Notre Dame. We had talked about the prospect of how exciting this could be, having, two teams from the very same state, right, going at it. I think this is awesome for the sport. I think Indiana and Notre Dame is awesome for the state of Indiana, and I'm super excited to see that game. Penn State is going to be hosting SMU. You got those Texas boys going to be going to the cold weather climate there in Beaver Stadium. I think that's the one that is the least. I think that one is the one that's the least talked about so far. We're going to talk about it today, and I think it's a little more interesting than what people give it credit for. I think that's going to be one of the better games. And then Texas, Clemson. I think that's an extremely interesting game. The line is huge on that game. It's the largest of all of the playoff games that Vegas has set, and Vegas has set all of them so far. That's the largest spread, a double-digit spread. So we're going to be all over that one. We got to talk about that one because I think there's an opportunity and some value there, and we'll kind of try it on for size. But look, you got to love the matchups here. I mean, whether you agree with the way the 12 team worked out, or it's not really the way it worked out. It's the parameters of the whole thing. The whole protocol of seeding. Whether you like that or not, these first round playoff games are going to be unbelievable. They're December 20th and 21st. Going to be absolutely fantastic. So let's jump in to talking about some of these, and we will. I'm really, really excited
I've
about
got
them.
the banners made for these as well, Mark. If we want to
Okay.
start with those.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's let's start with this Tennessee at Ohio State one though, because I don't know why. That's just where I want to start. But Tennessee on the road at Ohio State. That is crazy to say, but that's going down December 21st at 8 Eastern. Ohio State is currently a 7.5-point favorite. I see the over under on the screen there is set to a low 46.5, which is not surprising considering the high standard of defense that will be displayed on the field there in the two for this one. Welcome to the 12-team college football playoff. I mean, this is just going to be absolutely outstanding. I've heard several people talking about the cold weather climate here maybe being a factor in this game. Obviously, at this point, we don't know exactly what the weather's going to be in this one, but Tennessee ain't that far from Ohio, right? So it's cold in Tennessee right now too. So I'll just go ahead and put that out there now. We'll see what the weather's like. Obviously, it could affect the game, but both teams will be playing in the weather, right? And winner is going to be facing off against Oregon in the Rose Bowl. This one, I think, is pretty simple, Mason. Can Tennessee get over their road woes? Tennessee has not been a great road team under Josh Heupel in his tenure at Tennessee. Playing on the road is a very, very tough thing to do in the regular season. I can only imagine what this atmosphere will be like there in Columbus for this one. And I think more of an overarching point for this game and a kind of a point of contention and deciding who's going to be the winner here. Which team can hit explosive plays in the pass game? Because these two defensive lines and two defenses in general have been more than stout this season, as we talked about at the top of the video. So, which one of these offenses is going to be able to hit an explosive play? And I guess it could technically be in the run game, but specifically, I've got my eye on the pass game and who's going to be able to open it up a bit and get over the top of these awesome defenses. If you're new here to the First and Long College Football Show, you're a Tennessee or Ohio State fan, welcome. I hope you'll consider hitting that like button, hitting the subscribe button, coming and hanging out with us because one of you's season is not over and you still got a long way to go. So good luck to both of your teams. Let's jump in to the matchup here, and I've got some of the stats that I can display on the screen, and we'll just kind of go over these kind of quickly and look, and then Mason, I'll give you the floor and let you give us your spill on this thing. But the Tennessee stats displayed on the screen here, kind of the top half of this is offensive and the bottom half kind of defensive, and you can see where the strength of this Tennessee offense lies, Mason. It's rushing. This team has been a really, really good running football team. The offensive line seems to work a lot better under those circumstances, right? Whenever they're able to establish the run a little bit, they seem to kind of get into a groove with that scheme. Um, what can they do in the passing game? Like I said a couple of minutes ago, passing yards per game, 230.75. That's good for 62nd in the country. There's been moments that Tennessee has looked better, and I feel like there's been more of those moments towards the end of the season. As far as in the passing game, they're going to need to play their best game here because this is a really, really stout front for Ohio State, and you don't have to look far over their last 12 games that they've played this season to see that that's the strength of their team as well. Speaking of that defense, let's look at the Tennessee defense. They've been pretty much good at everything, Mason. Now, there hasn't been a ton of really great passing attacks that Tennessee has went up against this season. We saw Georgia kind of do their thing through the air on Tennessee, but 178.67 yards per game passing allowed is good for 16th in the country. And if you're thinking that's the worst stat on defense, right, on the screen there, that's pretty doggone good. So, again, the strengths of these two teams lie on the defense. And it will be extremely imperative that the offensive line for Tennessee is able to keep Nico upright and keep his eyes downfield. And it's going to be even more imperative that he's able to hit some of those downfield shots. Looking at Ohio State, the offense I feel like has been a little bit underwhelming this year, Mason, and I know I'm not alone in that sentiment. With Chip Kelly coming in as the offensive coordinator this season, there was a ton of excitement in the fact that there's amazing talent on this team, particularly at the skill positions, all over the field. Right, loaded at wide receiver. Everybody knows, the Egbuka, and the freshmen. They're all world, right? They're just all world, and then you got the two awesome running backs. And Will Howard, I feel like, has been a pretty good game manager, minus that Michigan game. I felt like, obviously, that was his worst game of the year. And that's what Ohio State is coming off of, that loss to Michigan. So I think you're going to get the undivided attention, obviously, of Ohio State after coming off of that painful loss. What can this offense muster against this really, really stout Tennessee defense? I don't expect Ohio State to be able to run the ball a whole heck of a lot, Mason. I mean, and I'll be surprised if either one of these teams sniffs over 150 yards rushing in this game. And I'm thinking more closer to like 100 yards rushing for the game for, at least one of these teams in this game. So, again, going to have to hit those playmaker wide receivers downfield over the top of that Tennessee defense. Got to figure out a way to keep the linebackers and the pass rush off of Will Howard and let him make his second and third and possibly fourth reads looking down the field against this Tennessee defense. With all that being said, I'm interested to see what you have to say about this one because this matchup, Ohio State's a big favorite here, Mason. And if you look statistically, they don't have an edge statistically, really. If you sit and look at it. So where is that edge that Vegas is inferring with this big line here over a touchdown in this game? And what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think the number is probably a perception based number as far as the line there. I know this game's being played in Columbus and like you said, Tennessee has struggled on the road. You're going to get a hot-headed Ohio State Buckeyes team in this matchup, coming off of the loss to Michigan. Everybody's telling you that you're soft, and everybody's telling Ryan Day that he can't win these big games. All of that has got to culminate to a boiling point. Right, and is Ohio State going to boil over? That's kind of my question here. But going into the X's and O's here for a minute, this game's going to come down to the lines of scrimmage. I mean, if there was ever a game, Mark, that was going to be won up front, it's this game. I mean, Tennessee's defensive line is extremely good. They're better than Michigan's right now. They're definitely better at stopping the run than Michigan's is right now. And we just saw what Michigan's defense did to Ohio State. And now I'm starting to wonder if Ohio State is going to be able to move the football against Tennessee. And on the flip side, you look at Tennessee, and the comparable game that I look at for Tennessee is the Georgia game. When I look at Tennessee's offense versus Georgia's defense, they actually had some success running the football. Dylan Sampson was averaging over 5 yards per carry, ended up with 19 carries for over 100 yards in that football game. And I think Ohio State's defense is a little bit better. I think their defensive line is probably a good bit better than Georgia's when it comes to rush defense. But my point is, I like Tennessee's rushing ability over against Ohio State's defense more than I like Ohio State's rushing ability over Tennessee's defense. All right, so I'm checking the box for Tennessee in that category. Then you go to the passing game for Tennessee. And while Nico has struggled at times to connect with his receivers on the deep balls, some of those examples, in particular the Georgia game, the receivers either weren't in position. I think the ball was in a good spot in some of those deep balls, or they just dropped the ball. And not saying that Nico played perfect in that game by any stretch, but he had a decent game against Georgia. It just didn't amount to any touchdowns. So it looks like a bad day for him. But that's a pretty good Georgia defense that he was going up against. But then you see going up against UTEP. I get it, it's UTEP, but he completed 74% of his passes almost. Average yard per attempt was 9.1 and had 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. And then you go to the Vanderbilt game, where, if you recall, Vandy was up 14-0 early in that game, and Tennessee kind of had to come back early and come back in the first half, and then kind of just put their foot on the gas in the second half, and also the defense just sat on Vanderbilt's offense. But in that game, Nico was 18 of 26, good for 69%, with 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, 9.9 yards per attempt. And in the Georgia game, he was 5.1. So I say all that to say, I think that Nico has gotten better here in the past few weeks at connecting on the deep shots and driving the ball down the field. He looks a little bit more poised, and I think that he's starting to build that confidence through these kind of lesser opponents and these lesser matchups, to where now I feel pretty comfortable saying that Nico should be able to connect on some plays at least. And I'm not saying 5 or 6. I'm saying like 2 or 3 plays. Probably 2, if I'm being honest. 2 chunk plays could be the difference in this football game, because I don't think that either team is going to have a ton of success on the ground. And so to me, my question is, can either of these 2 teams get to, like, who's going to have the more of the chunk plays, right? That's probably what this game is going to come down to. That being said, I also have liked Will Howard at times this year. I thought that the offense for Ohio State was getting better, and then we saw them just come out and absolutely lay an egg against Michigan. If I'm going to chalk this up to that was a rivalry game, it's just because it was Michigan. It's just because it was the team up north, and we're just going to cast that stat out and just pretend it didn't happen. Then if we do that, then I like Ohio State in this game. However, it's still fresh on my mind here, and I saw some things that I really didn't like. I saw some struggles on the offense in particular, and to me, I don't know if you can rectify those losses just because you're in a more emotional game and in a more meaningful game. I'm leaning Tennessee right now, Mark, and I think that my preview probably hinted at that. But to me, I definitely like Tennessee to cover. I don't know if they win, but Right now, my lean is telling me that Tennessee's going to have a more effective ground game, and we'll come back, folks. We'll be doing another preview, a full preview before this game is played. So I haven't quite made my mind up yet, but I'm looking at Tennessee thinking that they're the more physical team at the moment, and in these big matchups with powerful programs, the team that is more physical tends to win. Right now, to me, it's Tennessee, but I think that you could make a case for Ohio State too. It's one of the best matchups in the entire playoffs that we're going to see. I absolutely cannot wait for this one.
Yeah, me neither. This is one of the ones. I mean, I'm excited about all of them, but I'd be lying if I wasn't a little more excited about this one. Tennessee's a team that we've watched real closely this year. Obviously, we both live in Georgia. We're just right across the state line there. And we pay pretty close attention to Tennessee, and everybody that's a college football fan, you have no choice but to pay attention to Ohio State. They're in these discussions every single year, and here they are in the playoff after that loss that you talked about against Michigan. And I'm with you, Mason. I can't get that loss out of my head, and I also can't get out of my head the fact that I've seen this offense for Ohio State come to grinding halts throughout multiple points of this season, and um, you know. Was it an anomaly that Will Howard got in the red zone a couple of times against Michigan and threw interceptions? I mean, I guess it is. We'll see. We're going to see. This one's going to be at home at the very same place that you just lost that game. So, what is the crowd like in this one? I'm interested in that one as well. There was a lot of boo birds out last time the Buckeyes were on the field there at the shoe. So, what is will the fans have the patience throughout this game to stay in it, right? Whenever Tennessee is inevitably going to cause some three and outs and things like that. So I think I'm with you. I really like the upside of this Ohio State defense, and one way that I do see that Ohio State could win this game and cover the spread is by getting turnovers. Nico is going to be put in situations that are going to be a bit uncomfortable, and he's going to have to improvise, and he's going to have to execute in those moments, and that goes for Will Howard as well. So whichever one of these quarterbacks can execute at a higher level, they're probably going to be able to push their team over the other in what I think is going to be a low scoring game here. I would, with the over under set at 46.5, I'm interested to see where the public's money is going to come in on that. I would consider the under in that one just because I think this is going to be such a low scoring game. But we'll keep an eye on that as we get closer. I'm leaning Tennessee plus 7.5. I think Ohio State has got a clear path to win this game, but I think Tennessee has got a shot in this one for sure. We're going to revisit it as we get closer. We're currently about 9 days out from that one, so we'll be back on here in a few days to reconsider that and see if our minds have been changed any. All right, let's go to the comment section. I wanted to read some of these comments. Brian Browning is still freaking out about a team that we barely even talked about today. RIP Jules, OSU will beat Tennessee. I definitely, I mean, they're a favorite for a reason. There's no doubt about that. I know that Tennessee defense is really, really good. And let's think about it. I mean, we just saw Oregon give up how many rushing yards to Penn State? What I'm getting at, has Ohio State played a defense as good as Tennessee this year?
I think Oregon's better. I think that they're better all around. I like Tennessee's rush defense a lot more, but I think Oregon's just
Well, that's
faster, more athletic.
well, I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying as far as stopping the run, because I mean we know what Ohio
Yeah.
State wants to do. They want to run the football. I mean we know that we've even whenever they've beaten their head against the wall, they want to run the football, right? So, and I guess so. I should have been more specific. Have they played a rush defense this good? Because Oregon's rush defense is definitely not as good as Tennessee's.
Well, surprisingly, Indiana's is fourth in the country, and I know they haven't played anybody.
Yeah,
but to some degree that means something. It's not. We're not talking about week 4 and they hadn't played anybody and they're fourth in the country. They've got a large sample set. And honestly, if you go back in that game with Ohio State and Indiana, Ohio State was not running the football in that game for the first few
Right.
drives. And you remember they got backed up to, I think it was like second, or I know it was 3rd and 35 at one point, right? And they had the big play for 25 yards, and then they go for it on 4th and 10 and get that. So they open it up in the passing game, and then from then on, they just had too much momentum for Indiana to really do anything with Notre, or with Ohio State at that point. But
Well, I mean, even in that game, I put up some of the stats. I mean, 316 total yards for Ohio State in that game,
yeah,
115 yards rushing. I mean, I give Indiana their due. I mean, we have no reason to believe that Indiana's defense is not good. So I don't want to argue that they're not good. I don't, you know,
no, they
but
did everything they needed to do in that game, and
special teams
the
let them down.
special teams screwed them. They screwed them out of 14 points and a fumble. So it was the offense that was just that really cost them in that game, and I don't think their offense will play that bad again. Although Ohio State's defense is really good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. My I don't know. My point is, it's going to be tough sledding against that Tennessee defensive line. That Ohio State offensive line is it's been much maligned over the last few years, and here it is banged up going into the playoffs. Kevin Chandler, thanks for watching, Kevin. I appreciate it. Did you watch us go toe to toe with the best team in the nation? Yeah, Kevin is a Penn State fan, by the way. And 500 plus total yards, 292 yards rushing, 8.5 per carry. Yeah, Penn State. I just wanted to kind of talk about that conference championship, which we did. We reacted to it the night of, as that game concluded. But Penn State impressed me in that game. Now I have to say, Oregon impressed me more. Right, Oregon won that game and kept trying to extend their arm. And it showed me that Oregon may be, they may be a little leaky as far as that rush defense goes. But both teams really impressed me for sure. Let's see. John, well, I'll just say John. Thanks for watching, John. I appreciate it. I'm very excited to see this playoff system go Irish. Hey, man, good luck to your Irish there against Indiana. What do you think about that matchup with Indiana? And one thing that I really didn't do, and I meant to do it, I wanted to look up the matchup history, and I'm going to do it before we do our big breakdown here in a few days. But I was wondering what the historical value of this is as far as how much of these teams played, because obviously they're not too terribly far away from one another. So I'm curious what the history is with that. All right. Brian Browning says, after Boise State kicks Penn State's ass, don't forget Boise State doesn't deserve shit. Brian is on one tonight.
Yeah,
Brian is on one tonight.
absolutely.
Love you, Brian. It's going to be all right. It's going to be just fine. John says, hopefully it's a great game. I think it is going to be a really good game. Let's talk about that one. We might as well go into that one right now. Let me clear up some space here on my desktop, and we will jump into it. Let me add this and then go back to this. Okay. Indiana on the road at Touchdown Jesus in a first-round college football playoff game. This one's going down December 20th, so this will be the only game on the 20th, 8 p.m. Eastern. And right now, Notre Dame is a 7.5-point favorite. The winner of this game is going to go on to face the Georgia Bulldogs, who are getting the first-round bye after winning the SEC championship. Those teams will meet up in Louisiana for the Sugar Bowl. So for one of these teams to move on in this one, Mason, I think we've got to figure out, or do our best to try to figure out, who can win this game on the line of scrimmage. This is a historical brand in Notre Dame, and not a lot has changed over the last 20 years. Notre Dame prides themselves on strong lines of scrimmage, and they've been beat up a little bit throughout the year, as every single team in the country has at this point. Notre Dame has dealt with some injuries and just kept on chugging. We all remember the NIU loss that seems like it was like a year ago at this point. Terrible loss for Notre Dame, but it seems as though the team has really kind of buckled down ever since. Indiana, we were kind of just discussing before this segment started. Indiana has been great this season up until really their special teams and you could say their offense in a way as well kind of let them down against Ohio State. Take that loss, but every other game this season, minus the Michigan game, has been double-digit victories for Indiana. It's been really almost just very regimented, very almost militant like the way they've dismantled teams throughout the whole season. So it's been very, very impressive what Kurt Signetti and company has been able to do since moving over from James Madison last season. And obviously bringing a ton of those players, it was a offensive and defensive rehaul, right? Overhaul, I guess would be the correct word. How did those guys match up against against Notre Dame, who I feel like is a really stout opponent, Mason? Let's pull up some of the stats here. We'll go through those and kind of discuss this matchup here. If you guys are new to the channel, you're an Indiana fan, Notre Dame fan, welcome to the First and Long College Football Show. I hope you'll consider hitting the subscribe button. Hit like button for us so we can keep this video moving along to the next college football fanatic. We would certainly appreciate that. Indiana, as I said, you can see some of the stats and some of the rankings there for this team. The top half of the screen there is offensive stats. The bottom half, the defensive stats, and you'd be hard pressed to find anything statistically that Indiana has just been absolutely terrible at. We talked about the one game against Ohio State where the special teams looked absolutely terrible. And I'm not saying if Indiana didn't have the comedy of errors that they did on special teams that day, I'm not saying that they necessarily win that game, but it would certainly have been a whole heck of a lot closer because their defense played well enough to win, only allowing about 300 total yards in that game to Ohio State. And by the way, we just looked up the numbers a few minutes ago. Right around 100 yards rushing for Ohio State, who's got NFL running backs and good offensive linemen and just an overall really good team. So we have seen Indiana in a small sample size, mind you. We have seen them match up against some of the upper echelon opponents in the country or a upper echelon opponent in Ohio State. Didn't come out very good for Indiana in that situation. So rush yards per game, they're 52nd in the country. Pass yards per game, 29th in the country. Against this Notre Dame defense, you're going to kind of have to pick your poison one way or another. And I think that we talk about these games a lot. We do breakdowns. We've done them all year, obviously, here on the channel. And we always have some type of avenue for a team, say, they're going to have to be able to hit a play in the pass game or they're going to have to be able to hit a play in the run game. Indiana, this is one of those times where I'm coming and saying Indiana has got to be as balanced as possible against this Notre Dame defense. They've got to find a way to be balanced and be effective. And I'm not saying they haven't been balanced this year, but you've got to get all of your playmakers involved against this Notre Dame defense because there are NFL players on that Notre Dame defensive side of the ball wherever you really want to look. Now, there's been some injuries. Like I said, I assume Howard Cross, by the time this game comes along, he should be 100% or as close as he's going to be to 100% because his injury's just been kind of nagging and it's been getting better and better. So I would assume that he'll be fully healthy for this one. You lost one of your great secondary players, but it's been kind of a reload situation there in the secondary. I feel like they've got other players that they can shine the light on and guys that they're going to be able to trust whenever the bright lights of a playoff game are on, especially at home. Going to be a cold one here. I'm interested to see how Indiana, we talked about those lines of scrimmage. How does Indiana's defensive line hold up against this offensive line for Notre Dame and even more so the rush attack of Notre Dame? Notre Dame is not going to be balanced. We talk about Indiana and how they need to be as balanced as possible. Notre Dame, there's no secret about it. They're not very balanced, right? 101st in the country pass yards per game. They're just not super balanced. This wasn't a great wide receiver core last year. I don't think it's a great one this year, right? Again, but this is a really good rush attack with the quarterback and the running back there. You got Love, you got Riley Leonard. Those guys are a threat to take it to the house at any point. So really going to need that rush defense to step up for Indiana in this one to be able to give their offense plenty of chances to get down the field and score, because this is not a football game in which teams are going to be giving the ball back and forth by way of scoring touchdowns and kicking off to one another. There's going to be some punting going on, and there's going to be some running of the football, and some of this is going to look pretty old-fashioned, I do believe here. Again, I'm sure this will be a very cold game. I don't think there's many warm days in December in Indiana, right? So I think this will be a cold one. How cold is it? We'll see as it gets a little closer. We're about 8 days off from this game as we speak now. We're going to break this game down again in its entirety as we get a little bit closer. Just kind of wanted to get a preview here and get our tentacles on this one. You can see the stats down at the bottom of the screen there. Those are defensive stats. This team's been really good defensively just all around. Some would argue top 3 in the country, certainly top 5 in the country this season. But if you're going to make one argument against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish and that amazing defense, it is the fact that they haven't played a plethora of awesome offenses, right? Louisville would be one that I'd point to that was really good, but Texas A&M obviously has had their woes offensively. You kind of pick whichever one you want on the schedule there. Not a ton of great offenses that Notre Dame has faced off with. So you got to take this with a grain of salt, some of these stats and remember who's been played. Indiana, you could say kind of the same for them, Mason. They've had the one big game against Ohio State and then not a lot of competition, that's been playoff caliber or conference championship caliber contending teams. So we're gonna learn something about both of these teams in this big matchup. What are your thoughts? And I'll shut the hell up.
Well, and kind of piggybacking off of your last point there, the USC game was kind of close for Notre Dame up until there were 2 pick sixes at the end of the game when USC was about to go score. That ended up being the deciding factor in that game as USC lost by 14 points. You would point if you were looking at this schedule, at the end of the year, you would point to the Georgia Tech game and say, well, they beat Georgia Tech 31-13. That was a game that went into 8 overtimes with Georgia. But their starting quarterback was out, right? So you can't really look at Georgia Tech and say, you guys held them to 13 points. Well, that was with a backup quarterback. That doesn't really equate here. I think Indiana's offense is better than USC's, and USC was able to put up 35 points against Notre Dame. That's got me a little bit concerned for the Fighting Irish here. But make no doubt about it, this is going to be a defensive matchup. When I look at what Notre Dame does the best, it's running the football. It's Jeremiah Love running the football. He's got 15 touchdowns on the year so far this season. And I think that Indiana defensively, they're the best in the country at stopping the run. They're number 1 in the country, giving up only 70.8 rushing yards per game. And that includes that Ohio State rushing offense and that game as a stat in that number. Now, outside of that, did they face a lot of strong rushing attacks? No, they didn't. But I think that the Indiana defense is good enough to at least slow the run down. So then my question is, who is Riley Leonard going to throw the football to? Bo Collins has been, statistically the best receiver for Notre Dame this year. Diehard Notre Dame fans may be able to tell me that there's another emerging receiver that I don't know about. It seems like they just really haven't hit on a lot of these guys. I thought Jaden Greathouse was going to be great after last season or at some point last season, and he just hasn't really panned out. And I don't feel that Notre Dame has that playmaker at wide receiver at least. I do like Mitchell Evans at tight end, and I think that he is going to kind of end up being that safety valve for Riley Leonard when when he's in a situation where he can't run and let his legs be the safety valve. Riley Leonard can sort of tear you up in the running game, but I've seen Indiana this year contain these rushing quarterbacks in a pretty fair manner. I think that running the football with Riley Leonard would be a little bit of a mistake in certain situations against IU, and that's going to lead to him connecting with Mitchell Evans on a good bit of throws. If Indiana can bottle him up, well, now you're forcing Riley Leonard to really get to his potentially his second or third read and throw the ball to the outsides. And that's where he struggled. He's gotten better as the season's gone on. If you recall in the NIU game, and really in the NIU game and against Texas A&M, Riley Leonard struggled like really bad to throw the football. And you saw the response to that NIU loss from Marcus Freeman was, all right, let's get his feet back under him. We're going to run the football. We're going to be, a run-first offense, and that worked for for most of the season, really. But you probably didn't even notice it really if you weren't paying close attention or somewhat close of attention, I guess, to Notre Dame. But throughout the season, they started incorporating a little bit more of kind of a pro-style offense. You saw a little bit more of Riley Leonard throwing the football with some success. Still not asking him to go out there and win the game or anything like that. But he's become a better game manager, I think, and they're going to ask him to take his game up another level here. Because I think that this Indiana defense matches up really well with Notre Dame's offense. I think you'll also, one more point on Notre Dame and their offense, you're going to see a lot of screen passes and Jeremiah Love coming out of the flats. I think that the game plan here, there's no secret. It's get the ball to Jeremiah Love. He's the best running back in this game, at least one of the best in the college football playoffs. I think that if Notre Dame's going to win this football game, they've got to have him go over 100 yards total, at least, if not 150. Moving over to Indiana's offense. Now, Indiana's a little bit different. They can run the football. I like Justice Ellison. I think that he's a fine back. He's got 10 touchdowns on the year, over 800 yards. But then you've got Elijah Surratt, who has been outstanding, I think. Better than I could have ever expected, right? Curtis Rourke has been one of the best quarterbacks that nobody's talking about. And I think that he can absolutely carve up a defense. I was really looking forward to seeing him do it against Ohio State. I thought we were going to have a little bit more of a higher scoring game and more of a competitive game against Ohio State, and it just didn't quite work out. I think that when you look at that game, and I mean, the first drive was phenomenal. Curtis Rourke looked completely comfortable. The whole offense was just running, and they had this assembly line like system going, and things were on schedule. Everybody had their part. Everybody knew what they had to do, and then you had, I think it was the punt that went, or the snap that went over the punter's head, I think was the first issue that happened. And that led to 7 points. Then the offense struggled. And then you had the punt return for a touchdown. Now you've given up 14 points essentially. I think there was a fumble at some point too. And so you really just saw this Indiana offense struggle to get back on schedule. When IU is playing its best football, they're on schedule. I mean, we even saw it in the second half of the Michigan game. As soon as Indiana got off schedule, things really went south fast. So to me, the question for Indiana is, can you set up a game plan that keeps them ahead of the sticks, keeps them on schedule against this Notre Dame defense that I think is really good, and when this offense struggles, because they will struggle in this game at some point, they're going to get off schedule. I want to see the Indiana defense really pick up the offense and get that momentum swing back. I think that's kind of the feeling around the IU program is, when is the other shoe going to drop? Or at least it was, up until that Ohio State game, they were undefeated. And I think that everybody was kind of waiting with bated breath within the organization for the upset moment. And I don't necessarily, I mean, obviously that's not the greatest mentality to have, but it seemed like once that kind of happened, once they got off schedule, the doubt started to set in. And that's when I want to see, it's going to happen in this game too, but that's when I want to see the Indiana defense step up, get a turnover, get a sack, force a 3 and out, do something to get the momentum back into your offense's hands and get Curtis Work and this offense back on schedule. If they can play a little bit more complimentary, throughout the adversity, I think that Indiana really does have a chance to win this football game. I really think that they should have been more competitive against Ohio State had things not gotten off track. If they play their best football, Indiana, I really think that they could win this game pretty handedly. But I'm favoring Notre Dame. Saying all that, I'm still favoring Notre Dame in this one. I just I want people to understand that the Indiana team you saw against Ohio State is much more. I guess the Indiana team now is much more competitive than the team that showed up that Saturday, and I think we're in for a really good matchup here against Notre Dame.
Absolutely, it's going to be a great one there. Touchdown Jesus is going down. I can't wait to see this one. It's the lone game, as I said on that. Can't. I think the 20th was a Friday, if I'm not mistaken.
It
Anyway,
is, yeah.
yeah. So that'll be going down at 8 p.m. on the 20th Friday. The only game on that night. All eyes will be on this one. Good luck to both teams. Let us know in the comment section, what do you think the outcome of this one is going to be. Can't wait to see it. All right, guys. Looking in the comment section, I was reading along with you guys as we were doing our game breakdown there, and J Mac brings up a good point, and it was what I was thinking in my head the whole time. I didn't type it out there, but top 25 wins only count if they're still ranked top 25, and that's true. I mean, we're not giving Georgia Tech a top 25 win over Florida State at the beginning of the season, right? I mean, that doesn't count. Florida State was ranked at the time, but that's not a top 25 win. Um, so I thought that was worth pointing out because we had people talking about who's got top 25 wins and who doesn't. Texas doesn't have any top 25 wins, I don't believe, this season. There's several. And somebody made the comment in the comment section that it seemed like this year was the year to not have a hard schedule, and it benefited you. And I think that that's what we're trying to strike a balance between, right? We want these teams to schedule games that we're all interested in watching in the regular season. But if some teams are doing that and some teams aren't doing that, like how do we weigh that? Strength of schedule obviously is a part of this equation because otherwise Alabama would have never even been talked about, right? Alabama's strength of schedule was the only reason they were even ranked where they were at to begin with. With their losses, a couple of really terrible losses. In any other year, we would say those losses were terrible. So I'm going to consider them to be terrible. Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. Both of those teams were 500 for the year. So Alabama had a tough schedule, but they lost a couple of games there they shouldn't have. Brian keeps going about Boise State, and I mean, if we take a general poll and consensus, I mean, I like the Boise State story, and I've watched more Boise State football this year than I have ever in my life. Um, you know, but do we think that Boise State is the third best team in the country?
Yeah.
As fans. I mean, I don't have anything against Boise State. What do I have against Boise State? You know, um, I would have Boise State higher than 9, which is where they were at in the actual top 25 ranking to end the season. Um, but is Boise State beating Texas? Is Boise State beating Penn State? I don't know. I mean, we might eventually see that, and we're going to see in this playoff. If Boise State does well in this playoff, I think that it leaves a good taste in everyone's mouth going forward, right? With those types of teams. But if Boise State gets in there and pulls a Cincinnati, where Cincinnati ran into Alabama and just got mowed over in the college football playoff a few years ago, or like a TCU situation, people aren't going to forget that either, right? So Boise State should be in the playoff. Now, should they be ranked third? I don't know. I don't know about third. Um, but with the way everything's set up, as I said before, the playoff committee did their job. This worked out the way that it was designed to work out, and Boise State got the third seed. And I think the Boise State fans should be really, really happy with that. And who cares what anybody else has to say? Boise State's got the third seed. That's the end of discussion. Nobody's saying Boise State shouldn't, we need to kick them out of that third seed right now and fix, no, this is what we set up for this year. Boise State played within the parameters of that. They deserve to be at third, but objectively, the majority of people are not saying that Boise State is the third best team in the country. I mean, they're just not. They're just not. And the best team they played this year, they
Well,
lost.
and to be clear, we're not talking about a power rating. We're talking about as a ranking based on who they played, right? Their only loss came to Oregon. It was a close loss. Oregon's the number one team in the country. But Boise State doesn't have a huge win. There's no
Right.
Alabama under their belt. There's no Penn State under their belt. There's no Clemson. There's no Louisville, or you know what I mean? Like that's not even a big one, but that's kind of my point. There's no big ranked win that we can really rate Boise State to. All we have is a good loss, and that just doesn't hold up very very well. But I think from a power rating, but from the eyeball test, I think that they are a top 12 team in the country. I really do feel like that's that's a fact.
doubt.
Like them versus, I really want to see them versus Arizona State, and unfortunately, we're not going to see that unless both teams are playing for a national championship. Which I mean, that would be crazy, honestly. If that were our national championship, the college football nerds would be going crazy. Like that would be absolutely nuts if we saw Arizona State and Boise State in this playoff. But yeah, nonetheless, I mean, Boise, they deserve to be in. I just don't like that we automatically gave. I don't like that we gave Georgia the number 2 spot. Like, let's be honest. Would they be number 2 whether or not they got the auto bid? Yeah, they would be. But with 2 losses, in some cases, like let's say Penn State was undefeated by the time Oregon faced them, I would want Penn State to get the number 2 spot, right? I hope that made sense there. It doesn't come down to bias or anything like that. I think that the top 4 teams should get the bye in this format.
Yeah. And, and just to be clear, Boise State was not the center of this conversation today. That was not the center of this conversation today. Was automatic buys, we've been saying since the very beginning of this whole thing, don't need to be a thing. I don't know why these conferences they had to have that like security blanket of I know I'm going to get one team in, and I thought it was bad from the get go, and I still think it's bad. Just rank the teams and seed them the way they're ranked. That was the whole thing, the whole point, the whole time. Um, is Boise State the third best team in the country? I don't think so. Are they one of the 12 best? Yes. Do they deserve to be in the playoff? Yes, absolutely. No doubt about it. Are they a good team? Yes. How good are they? We're going to find out. That is the one good thing about this college football playoff. We're going to find out sooner rather than later, guys. We got about 8 or 9 days, and we're going to find out who's got a
Also,
set of nuts on them.
I really wish we could have seen Boise at like number 8 or 7, the number 8 or 7 spot, a home field advantage for Boise State, playing on the Smurf turf. I would just love to see that game. I don't care who it would be against. I would just really like to see a team go and play Boise, in Idaho on the Smurf turf. That would be phenomenal.
Uh, J Mac 7-5 Georgia Tech boat race the best SEC team Georgia. Well, I don't know if you remember, or maybe you went to sleep, J Mac, but Georgia ended up winning that one. Um, it was a pretty awesome ending to the game too.
Yeah.
But we're not going to sit here and pretend like Georgia didn't win that game or something. I mean, come on, guys, that's craziness. Georgia scored 44 points in the second half. I think they
Well,
deserved
and
to win
and
that one.
Georgia Tech at 7-5 also, and I sound like a freaking apologist for Georgia's performance in that game, but I mean this to credit Georgia Tech more than to excuse Georgia's potential or near loss. But for most of the season, I think for all 5 games, at some point, Haynes King didn't play in those 5 games, so he's been banged up all year, and we saw him
No,
at his
everybody's
absolute
gonna,
best.
and that's the thing. Everybody's gonna pretend like they knew what Georgia Tech was because of their record or something. Y'all didn't watch. J Mac, you didn't watch not one damn Georgia Tech game. I can guarantee you. You don't know anything about what that team's about. You just got a talking point about you, and that's fine. But people that were really watching all season, and I did watch Georgia Tech when they were healthy. It was a totally different thing. Georgia Tech made strides this year, and Georgia played with their food like they always do in games that are not big games. I don't know what else to tell you, but Georgia figured out a way to win like they almost always do. Um, so something to it, right? All right, let's keep going. Yeah, peanut butter posse. That's what I was trying to say. Georgia has had trouble getting up for games this year. It's not just this year, peanut butter posse. It's every year. And look at Alabama. Nick Saban steps away from one season, and look at what Alabama has done. They can't get up for a Vanderbilt game. They can't get up for an Oklahoma game. Y'all think Vanderbilt and Oklahoma are more talented than Alabama? No, but that's the difference between a really awesome coach that's running a high level program is being able to get your team up for those types of situations. And Kalen DeBoer failed that test a couple of times this year, and that's what bit Alabama in the ass this season.
Yeah. Well, Kirby did too. He just had like the Georgia's team is just a little bit is just more resilient. They just believe that
Yeah.
they're in every game, and I don't even know how you
Well, and
quantify
and
that. You don't.
that and that's my point. Kirby is not as good at doing that as Nick Saban was. Nick Saban was way better at getting the team consistently ready to win ball games week in and week out, no matter the opponent. Kirby does his best rendition of that. He's not as good at it as Nick was, but it goes to show you like that. That's think of like Miami. They went through the same thing. Can't get it right. Those last couple of games of the season. Do you think those teams were better than Miami? I don't think they were better than Miami, but Miami lost the game, and that's it. That is what it is. I mean, statistics are for losers. Um, anyway, anyway, um, you know, teams that go into these matchups, and the better team doesn't always win the game. I mean, and if you, that's obvious. I mean, otherwise we'd never play any of the games. like, uh, not the best team doesn't always win. Um, that's what makes this sport so intriguing. All right, let's keep it going here. Let's go Clemson, Texas, and then we'll finish up with SMU, Penn State. How about that? Um, here we go. The Clemson Tigers going on the road to Austin, Texas. The bright lights of the Longhorns. Texas is a 11-point favorite in this one. Over-under is set at 51.5. Clemson back in the college football playoff for the first time since 2020. Texas is obviously there for the second year in a row after making an exit against Washington last year in the first round of the 14 playoff. But this is a whole new thing. Texas is fresh off of the loss in Atlanta to the Georgia Bulldogs in the SEC championship game. Clemson, obviously, off a thrilling victory against SMU that came down to the very last second, where Clemson was able to hit a long kickoff return and then kick a field goal, win this thing as literally time expired, and rip the hearts out of the SMU Mustangs in the ACC championship. That obviously gives Clemson an automatic berth into the college football playoff, and here they are on the road at Austin. We'll pull up some of the stats on your screen. If you're a Clemson Tigers fan or a Texas Longhorns fan, welcome to the First and Long College Football Show. If you're new here, if you're not, or even if you are new here, hit the subscribe button. We'd love to have you around. We've got tons of college football left this season. We're really just getting going in this postseason activity that's all new for all of us. So it's going to be very, very entertaining stuff. We hope that you'll come and hang out with us throughout that whole process because we think that it's going to be a whole heck of a lot of fun. And please like the video. As far as in the comment section, tell us what you think's going down in this game. Texas fans, Clemson's fan, college football fanatic, whatever you are, let us know. What do you think the outcome is in this one? We're going to give you our best guess on it, and we are going to break this one down more in entirety as we get a little closer to the game. As we record this, we're about 9 days out from that December 21st game going down there in Austin. Clemson this year, Mason, I feel like has taken some strides in the right direction offensively. It was a bit of a rocky start for Garrett Riley coming into Clemson after taking TCU to the national championship game. Everybody was so excited that Riley was coming to help run this offense, call the plays, and it took a little bit to get going. Cade Klubnik had some of his, just young football player stuff, going on, turning the football over last year. I feel like Cade Klubnik has taken a huge step forward, and therefore I feel like this offense has taken a huge step forward. Total yards per game, ranked 12th in the country this year, so that would be your total offense stat. Rush yards per game, I think this is important in this matchup. Got to be able to run the football against Texas in this matchup. So it's going to be extremely important for Phil Maffa to be healthy. Also going to be very important that Cade Klubnik is ready to go and ready to run when necessary. We've seen what Georgia's been able to do with running the quarterback some against Texas. We saw what Gunnar Stockton did there in the second half as Carson Beck was injured in that SEC championship game. He was able to scramble and create some things with his legs, and I think Cade Klubnik possesses that ability as well in this game. We've seen Cade hit some big runs at the end of games this year, some for touchdowns even to win a game at one point. So I feel like Cade has really kind of pulled his weight in this offense this year, and that's made all the difference. I think the wide receiver group that was a big point of contention in the offseason. We talked about Clemson in the offseason. Where's this wide receiver room going to be at, right? Are they a step beyond what they were the season before? And I think they are a step better. Is it a giant step? Maybe not a giant step, but a step in the right direction, right? Bryant Wesco has been a really nice shining light on this offense, right? Excuse me. Antonio Williams has done what Antonio Williams does, and you've had a few other contributors there. Obviously, Jake Brenningstool, the tight end, is a go-to guy in this offense as well. So I feel like the passing offense has gotten better. Obviously, Cade has got something to do with that as well. Got to be able to run that football, Mason. Super important. Georgia, both matchups against Texas, was able to win the rushing battle and win those games. I think that's super, super important. Excuse me, guys. I'm sorry. Wintertime, and I got a frog in my throat. Defensively for Clemson, this defensive line is stout. And this is one of the matchups that I'm most interested in, Mason. We've seen Georgia's defensive line, and I guess you would include those outside linebackers and linebackers in general, be able to create a lot of havoc against Texas. And in that second game, We saw a ton of holding penalties against Texas, and you guys can say it in the comment section all you want to. I can go back and freeze frame for you 10 different times Texas is holding defensive linemen in that football game. I mean, it's clear as day, holding on for dear life. And so I know that Kelvin Banks was not able to play in that SEC championship game, but this was supposed to be one of the stronger units of this football team. And I don't know that this offensive line for Texas is as good as what we thought they were. So can that Clemson defensive line, who I think, by the way, has got some NFL players on it, are they able to be disruptive and stop the run to the tune of the way the Georgia Bulldogs did? And I think that is the key to being able to play some defense against this Texas team. Speaking of Texas, I've been very clear with how I feel about Texas and their offense this season, Mason. I feel like it's missing something. And that's something I feel like is like a Bijan Robinson like they've had in the past. They don't have that this year. They do not have that this season. The rush yards per game are not terrible. I mean, they're not it's not like they can't run the ball at all, but when they play in these big games against the really good defenses, they haven't been able to run the football very well. And so I'm interested to see how that matchup works out here. Clemson's defensive line against that running attack of Texas. Defensively for Clemson, you got to buckle up and try to just contain these wide receivers. You're not going to be able to stop them from getting yards. Some of these plays that Texas runs offensively, if the offensive player does what he's supposed to do, it's nearly impossible to defend. And both times we've seen Texas play Georgia, we've seen Texas hit gash plays. Every game that Texas has played this season, let's just be honest. We've seen Quinn Ewers be able to get the ball out to wide receivers and hit some gash plays. But it's been converting those yards into points against the more stout defenses this season that's been the issue. Didn't generate a lot of points against Georgia either time that they played, 15 and 19, right, respectively in those games. So Texas has got to figure out a way to turn those yards in the passing game into points. And I think they're going to have an opportunity to do it. I think that if you're going to pick on something on this Clemson defense, it's Texas has got a clear advantage in being able to pass the football here. So it all boils down to, does Quinn Ewers have time to let the longer developing plays develop? I keep referencing these Georgia games, but it's the best team that Texas has played this year, right? One of the only good teams that Texas has played this season. And in those games, Texas has given up 13 sacks, Mason. So the passing game is good. How good could it be if you're not giving up 13 sacks in those two games? And that kind of leads me to where I'm at with this football game. Is Texas going to protect the quarterback or aren't they? And is Clemson going to be able to get after Quinn Ewers or aren't they? And it seems to me like Steve Sarkisian, I'll let you kind of answer this, but I'll give it to you after this. But as far as the Arch Manning thing goes, I've heard begs and pleas from fans and just college football fans in general saying Arch needs to get his chance and blah, blah, blah. I don't agree with that at all, Mason. And I know that you like Arch Manning a lot, and I do too. I like the long-term prospect of Arch Manning. But the thought of Arch Manning coming in here and somehow unlocking this offense, I think it's a farce. I think it's not going to happen. And I think if Texas is waiting on Arch Manning to come in here and win them a national championship here in the first year of him really being a part of the equation as a quarterback there, I just don't think that that's going to happen here.
Mark,
and I
don't say that.
I don't. And Arch Manning is going to be really good. He's good on his feet. There's no doubt about that. Maybe he comes in and he runs the ball a bunch, but eventually Texas is not going to be able to run the football whenever they get up against a really, really solid defense here in the playoffs. Then what is he going to do? Is he able to operate this offense in its entirety? That's where Quinn Ewers has got the upper hand clearly, and there's some kind of reason or another that Steve Sarkisian has kept Quinn Ewers there. He knows something that we don't, and I'm going to trust him on that quarterback situation. He's given me no reason to not trust him to make that decision. I think Quinn Ewers gives Texas the best chance to win. I think you just got to protect his ass. You can't. I mean, he can't win the game for you on his back. So Texas got to figure out a way to generate the run game while staying balanced, and you got to figure out a way to turn yards into points in the passing game. Something that Texas has struggled with this season. The receiver room's not as good. Let's just be real. Matthew Golden is unbelievable, but there's no like big red zone threat here. And I think that Texas has got to figure out a way to get that handled. Maybe it's the tight end, right? The tight ends kind of went MIA against Georgia because they keep him in to block because they can't keep defenders off of the quarterback. So he hasn't even been able to like run routes, Gunnar Helm that is. So is Texas able to protect well enough to get him involved offensively? I feel like it all just kind of boils back down to that offensive line for Texas. Are they as good as what we thought they were going into the season, or aren't they? I think this game will at least somewhat tell us more about that story and how it will develop going forward in the playoff. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, well, going back to the Arch Manning thing, I said don't say that when you were saying that he can't come in or he's not going to come in and lead Texas to a national championship in the playoffs in his first season. Like I hear that, and as a Georgia fan, I'm thinking like, oh gosh, you're going to end up in a clip somewhere, on some Texas fan page, and when Texas is hoisting the trophy at the end of the year,
well, I probably
or beginning
will
of the year.
I've been a known Texas hater. I've got some of them.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna say Texas hater because I don't hate Texas, but
you're a wanted man in Texas.
Texas fans were very quick to find the closest Georgia fan before both of these matchups and let them know that they were going to kick their ass, and that didn't happen. And all those comments got deleted. I wish I could show you right now, but they all got deleted for some reason. Go ahead. Sorry.
But the reason I was so big on Arch Manning going into the Georgia game is because I thought that he possessed a skill set to exploit one of Georgia's weaknesses in that game. I thought it was a good plan from a matchup perspective. Going up against Clemson, I haven't seen that really be the case against Clemson. I mean, even with Lenore Sellers, who had a great game, who had a couple of good runs on the ground against Clemson, South Carolina still only scored 17 points in that game, so it's not like Clemson gave up a bunch of yards or anything like that to a rushing quarterback or a dual threat quarterback. Not rushing only is Lenore Sellers, but my point is, I also agree with you that Quinn Ewers gives them the best chance to win when he's protected. I don't think that Clemson's front. It matches up as well as Georgia's does. I really like T.J. Parker. I love Peter Woods. Sammy Brown's been getting involved with Wade Woodaz being injured. Sammy Brown, the true freshman, has been able to really get in there and get some time, and I think that that's really important. But to me, Georgia just had something figured out against Texas, and it was clear in both of those football games. I think that this Texas offensive line, assuming Banks comes back at left tackle, which I don't have any inside information on that. I wish I did. I could share with you. You guys, Texas fans, in the comment section, let us know what your feel is for Banks and whether or not he plays in this one. But because I think that is a really big deal. Clemson has a lot to throw at you. I mean, they've still got some dudes up front. Ask SMU, because they were all over Jennings' ass, especially in that first half of that football game. And they can do similar things against Texas, but I don't think Clemson's going to end up at the end of the night when we're looking at the stat sheet. I don't think Clemson's going to end up with 6 or 7 sacks. I don't think it's going to be that type of performance. But they can get after Quinn and move him out of the pockets, get him off balance, and get him uncomfortable. And I think that that's the plan for Clemson in this one if they're going to win this football game. The other thing for Texas, I'm wondering, are they going to get in the end zone, in the red zone? Are they going to get there on the ground? as good as Wisner has been all season long, he's only had 3 rushing touchdowns so far this year. That's been a big issue for them, and a reason why they're not scoring in the red zone. When you're scoring in the red zone, you've got great tight end play, which I think you're going to struggle with Gunnar Helmick once again in this game because of his matchup with the linebackers. He's better than the linebackers. He should be able to get open, but we've seen, first of all, Texas force him to block in some situations, but then secondly, we've seen him get covered up by some fast linebackers, and Clemson has that. They've got speed at the linebacker position, so I think that it's going to get tough in the red zone once again, and unfortunately for Texas fans, that leads to field goals or field goal attempts. If Auburn is able to hit those field goals. He missed a couple, obviously, in the SEC championship game. So, to me, that's kind of the game plan for Clemson. Bend, don't break, right? Keep Texas in front of you, force them to field goals, and then Clemson's got to be able to perform. Texas has possibly the best defense in the country. I still give that nod to Ohio State, but I think that Texas does have the best defense in the SEC, and that's saying something in a SEC that's loaded with defenses. We just saw Clemson.
That secondary is sick.
Yeah. The secondary, to me, when I was watching the SEC championship game, I was getting ready to say that the Texas secondary won them that football game, right? Until we saw, the end result. Obviously, they didn't win, but the secondary for Texas was flying all over the field. They were a problem not just in the passing game, but also in the running game, in the screen game. It looked like all 5 of the DBs knew exactly where the football was going as soon as the ball was snapped, and they were flying to the football. It was really impressive to watch. So I think. But my point in saying that, though, is Clemson just faced one of the best defenses in the SEC, and they scored 14 points against South Carolina. That's not going to cut it in this football game. Texas is getting more than 14 points. Texas is scoring probably 15 in field goals alone. So Clemson better find a way to get Bryant Wesco the football, because he seems to be, as good as Antonio Williams has been, I think Williams is a little bit more of a possession type receiver, not somebody who necessarily takes the top off the defense. Bryant Wesco is your playmaker, and he's the catalyst, or like kind of the wild card in this matchup for Clemson. You got to let him go deep. You got to trust that Klubnik's going to get him the football in this game, and connect on those. And then outside of that, complement those passing attempts and those down the field threats with some quarterback draw. We saw that being effective with Gunnar Stockton. Now, Texas didn't game plan for Gunnar Stockton in the SEC championship game. They're gonna have a game plan for Cade Klubnik, and knowing kind of what he does and when he likes to run and what his tendencies are. But I think a scrambling quarterback can find opportunities and extend the play, extend the drive with his legs when things are not open down the field. And I think you'll see a pretty good bit of that from Cade Klubnik too. I'm really excited for this matchup. I do think Texas wins it. I'm not ready to give a score prediction yet, or a bet against the spread, or anything like that. But I'm leaning Texas right now. And I think Austin is going to be absolutely on tilt. Like it's going to be full tilt over there. Going to be a crazy environment. Would love to catch a game there one day, but this one, if you are catching that game, let us know in the comment section, because we want to hear from you on what that was like when it's all said and done. But leaning Texas right here, but I think Clemson's going to be pretty competitive too, Mark.
You bring up some really good points, and I'm glad that you highlighted the Texas defense, because I didn't really do that at talking through this thing. But that is this Texas team. I talked a lot about the offense on the front end and some of the woes that I felt like they've kind of went through this season. They haven't kind of went through. The offense hasn't been nearly as good as what it was last year. That's undeniable. But the defense has been that much better. I feel like the secondary has been that much better. last year they were better on the defensive line on that front. Now I feel like their strength is kind of on the back end there. I think that makes it all the more important that Phil Maffa is healthy in this game. He had 1,000,000 carries for like no yards in their last game that they played against SMU. He's got to be able to run the football. He's got to be able to tote the rock because you got to be able to. I mean, he's a big presence. He's a big back. So for him to be able to draw some attention and bring that secondary in closer to the line is going to give you that opportunity for a guy like Bryant Wesco to maybe be able to find a crease in this Texas defense, and there's not going to be many of them. So if you get one or two, you have to hit it. So I'm with you, Mason. I'm on Texas with this one. I think Texas is probably more than likely going to cover this 11-point spread here. I think Clemson is the team in the college football playoff right now that doesn't belong. I'm just going to be honest with you. And it has nothing to do with Clemson as a program. It has nothing to do with, just where this team's at right now. They won the ACC championship, and it's been a great season for Clemson. But I don't see this team as being one of the 10 best teams in the country this season. And I think Texas's defense is going to be really, really, really tough to deal with there with the home crowd behind them. Clemson's going to have to be in the right play at the moment that they go to the line, right? And that headset cuts off. There's not going to hardly be any change in plays, right? It's going to be tough, man. I expect Clemson's offense to sputter some, get some false starts, things like that. Texas has got the upper hand here. There's a reason this is an 11-point spread on this one. I could see Texas winning this thing by 10. We'll talk more about it as we get a little bit closer to the game. Y'all hit that subscribe button, hit the like button for us so this video will keep going on through the YouTube universe. Thank y'all so much for watching. I appreciate it. All right. Whoa, we got 72 comments in here. What's up, guys? What's up, everybody? Derby, how you doing? I'm going to look up Notre Dame ticks now to see where they are sitting. Yeah, that it's kind of funny you should say that. I was thinking about this yesterday. It seemed like a lot of teams that had a good feeling that they were going to the college football playoff, a lot of the fan bases didn't go to the conference championship games. And I know that doesn't apply to Notre Dame. But there was the the SEC championship and the Big Ten championship. Those stadiums were the most full. But like the Big 12 championship, did you see all those empty seats, man? I mean,
Well, there were empty seats at the SEC championship game, and I know
yeah,
there
there
were
some.
because like 2 hours before game time, I was looking at tickets and seeing like how much they were, how expensive they were, and you could get in there at like I want to say it was lower level for $132 a ticket. Like
Wow,
that's extremely
that's
cheap.
unheard of. Yeah, I mean, just to put that in perspective, guys, I mean, to go see Georgia, Alabama in the SEC championship any of the last 4 years, well, I guess LSU was in there once, but anyway, those games tickets were what, at least 500, Mason, and that's not like the best seats in the house or anything. Like I remember, what was it, 2017? Tickets were closer to like $1,000, wasn't it? Um, because
Oh
Georgia
yeah,
had not been in it in so
it was
long.
over. I want to say it was over 1,200 was like the minimum to get in for the Georgia and Alabama national championship game in
Mm.
17.
I
It
remember
might have been the
in
one in 21 or 22, but I don't know.
I'll never forget it. I was sitting on the 12th row in Sanford Stadium, right on the 50-yard line, behind the Tennessee bench in 2016. Mason's over here on the other side of the stadium, somewhere over here, and uh, Tennessee hits that Hail Mary. That game, I can't. Tickets for that game were pretty outrageous. Um, I remember
I know
thinking like,
it, but
"Holy shit!" Because
still,
I
it
didn't have
was
any money
like,
back then, and I was just like, "Holy shit! I don't."
yeah,
This is my
and
money for the week I just spent here.
well, and y'all had tickets. I just went and I was just going to tailgate and had a date with me and all that. We were just going to tailgate and have a good time. And I looked up, right before game time and got tickets on like the 45-yard line. I think we were 6 rows up behind the Georgia bench, and I paid like $430 a ticket, which right now to get to get those seats, like $430 sounds like a freaking a hell of a deal. I mean, in some of those games, I mean, if you were facing Tennessee at home, you'd probably pay $400 just to get in the place, let alone midfield right behind the Georgia bench. So, but things have changed. These, at least for Georgia, it's tough to get into. It's tough to get to a football game in the state. At least you're better off going to an away game.
Oh man, just reading some of these comments. Are y'all behaving over there? Y'all make sure you're
Not so
behaving.
much. Hey, people are on one tonight, man. We were talking about how everybody was kind of, on edge at home in our home lives, and then we come to the comment section, and man, there's
That's true.
some people are being. Mercury must be in retrograde, or it must be like a full moon or something cosmic is going on or something.
Well, I must be a weird cat because I've been cool and calm and collected all day, which is not my nature.
Same here.
I joke around. That is your nature, though. That is way your nature. I am not. That is not my nature at all. I joke around about it actually, and everyone that's typically around me or knows me always laughs when I'm like, me, just cool, calm, and collected. Anybody that knows me is like, what? What are you talking about, you idiot? Oh God! But I've been super. I got good news today, man. I don't owe Uncle Sam anything. Actually, Uncle Sam owes me money, so I'm in a good mood.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
It's got me. It's got me feeling like I did something right this year. I don't
You've
owe
got
Uncle Sam any money.
You got a several $1,000 grin on your face, and it would cost more to get that grin off your face, I think. So I get it.
Yeah. Well, I wrote everything off the right way this year. Let's just say that. And props to the CPA lady. Thank you, lady. Appreciate it. All right, we got one more first round game to talk about. We're gonna. I did want to kind of mention some of the transfer portal stuff. Maybe we'll just kind of mention that at the end of the show. Um, just kind of some collective thoughts. We're not necessarily going into like specifics. Not a lot of people have committed yet or anything like that. But I did just want to kind of go through that and talk about some of the players that are available for some of these teams. I know all you guys are playoff. You guys are gearing up for the playoffs, so you're not even thinking about talent acquisition right now. But your head coach is. I guarantee you, your head coach is thinking about it right now. So we will kind of talk about that just a little bit and how we're gonna, kind of try to cover that a little bit this year without turning into, 24/7 or on 3 or something, and covering it and bugging you guys in your, in your notifications and things every 3 minutes.
We don't want to be a multi-million-dollar show. Like that's not what we're trying to do here.
No, hell no. Well, that wouldn't be no fun. Shit.
Yeah.
That would not be any fun. I'd have to be buttoned up. We'd be selling out to corporate sponsors. No. It couldn't be us. It couldn't be us. All right. SMU at Penn State. First round of the playoffs. It's going down at Beaver Stadium. 12/21, December 21st, going down at noon. This will be our noon game. Last I saw, we have it on the banner here, Penn State, 8.5-point favorite. I had it written down at 9, so I'm sure you could probably find a couple different numbers there. Over-under set at 53.5 right now. We're about 9 days out from this matchup now. We're going to revisit this thing here on the First and Long College Football Show, and we hope that you will be along for the ride all the way through the playoffs to the national championship, to the offseason, back to spring games again. We never stop here. So if you haven't hit the subscribe button, I hope you'll consider doing it now because we got your wall-to-wall Power 4 college football coverage and even some teams outside of the Power 4. So we got you covered. We hope you'll come and hang out with us if you're an SMU or Penn State fan or just a college football fanatic like us. Hit that like button for us real quick as well. Helps the video keep going through the YouTube universe. We would certainly appreciate it, navigating our way through that matrix. SMU, fresh off of the loss in the ACC championship game to Clemson, came roaring back, Mason. I knew SMU had a chance to come back in that second half. I thought it was a slim chance that they would be able to pull off the comeback. They did. They pulled it off. They tied the game up with very little time left in the game and give up a special teams blunder to a guy who's never even returned a kick all year on Clemson's team. And that's how college football works, man. Clemson's able to hit one play from there, kick a field goal, win this thing as time expires, and absolutely crush the hopes of SMU. But fear not, the 12-team college football playoff is here. SMU, your season is still alive. Penn State went through a similar situation, battling back and forth, working their way back into the Big Ten championship game against Oregon multiple times as Oregon tried to extend their arm and keep Penn State at arm's length. Penn State, I thought, was very impressive in that game. Not quite as impressive as Oregon, but certainly impressive nonetheless, specifically offensively. They were very impressive. So we're going to kind of go through some of the stats today, do our best, do our best educated guess on who we think is going to win this thing. As I said, we're going to revisit this game as we get a little bit closer to game time, but wanted to kind of get our tentacles wrapped around this thing and put our feelers out there, and also hear from you in the comment section. Y'all let us know, what do you think the final score is for this one? I would really love to hear from you guys. Obviously, Vegas feels good about Penn State in this one. Let's kind of look at what SMU was able to do this season. Look, it wasn't a murderer's row of competition, Mason, and we can all put that behind us at this point. That the schedule, the what SMU has went through this season, their wins, their losses, all that stuff has been mulled over, over and time again over the last few weeks. SMU's in. Did they play a murderer's row? Have they played a ton of great competition? No, they haven't. And I think that was part of the reason you saw SMU get punched in the mouth early in the game against Clemson. Clemson was able to come out and absolutely, like a battering ram, run through this SMU offense, defensive line. Really, it was the lines of scrimmage where Clemson was flexing their muscles in this one. Once SMU got their feet under them, really at halftime, what was it, 24-7 at halftime, something like that. They're able to get some things going offensively, run their program, which is through the passing game. They can run the ball decently, and they use the running back a ton in the passing game, but it's the passing game that is the real propeller that pushes this whole thing forward for SMU offensively. Kevin Jennings, great running quarterback. He's very, very mobile, good arm, kind of a weird delivery there, but that doesn't really matter at this point in the game. They've got some playmakers that can make some plays down the field. This SMU offense is potent. It is potent, and they can score. They're going to have their work cut out for them against this Penn State defense, though. Defensively, SMU is very good at stopping the run. We saw this defensive line for SMU flex their muscles against Clemson late in that game, and they got some big boys over there at SMU now. Let me just tell you, are they crazy deep? Do they have just a plethora of 300-pounders to throw in the middle of that defense? No, I wouldn't say that, but I was impressed with the physicality of this defensive line for SMU. I was worried about it going into that matchup, and I feel like they proved us right, and they held up to what their ranking was throughout the season. SMU was really good at stopping the run this season. 93.38 yards per game allowed rushing. That's fourth in the country, and I see why. They've got some dudes on the front of that defense that they clog holes, man. They're huge. They're absolutely huge, and they don't get pushed back a whole heck of a lot. They hold their ground, and they allow those linebackers to operate. The passing defense, that is more of a concern for SMU. Now, how does that relate all to Penn State? Penn State, we all saw what they did against Oregon. I mean, 300 yards rushing against Oregon, right? That was an unbelievable performance running the football, and left everybody in the nation, including Oregon fans, wondering, is that our rush defense, or was the rush defense that we saw earlier this year, was that it, or which one here? I mean, it was one of those performances by Penn State's offense where it was like, man, without the turnovers, I mean, Penn State's got a real good shot to win that game. But that's been the issue, right? When this offense has been tasked with being able to throw the football, even in just a couple little situational points throughout the game, they fail those tests, Mason. They don't score points in correlation to the yards that they gain. They did in this past game against Oregon. They scored some points, enough to win, but then the defense, it was another hole in the boat that you got to stick your finger in. The defense couldn't stop Oregon from making explosive plays. So if it ain't one thing, it's the other in these big games for Penn State, and we all know the woes that Penn State and James Franklin have went through in these big games. Let's kind of look at some of the stats. I think a lot of people would be surprised to see the offensive stats for Penn State this season because they're top 3 in the Big Ten in just conceivably every category offensively, right? And as you can see on your screen there, they're top 3rd in the country in just about everything offensively there. So defensively, are you able to slow down that passing attack for SMU? That's going to be the big question in this one. I think SMU's got a little bit of a step on Penn State as far as through the passing game. Penn State's going to have a lot on their mind with trying to contain Kevin Jennings. And if there's been one thing that Penn State has not been great at defensively this season, it's been getting beat over the top, right? We saw it even as far back as against Bowling Green earlier this season. Mason, Bowling Green threw for a lot of yards on this Penn State team. Now, I'm sure they've grown some since then. I like Penn State in this game. I like the matchup. I like it being at home. It's going to be freezing cold. I don't think there's many warm days at Beaver Stadium in December, right around Christmas time. So, going to be a cold one here. Who knows? It could possibly be snowing. I think the elements probably are in the favor of Penn State marginally, a small margin there. Probably give them a couple of points for playing at home here. But it seems to me like the strengths of this game and the strengths in these matchups favor SMU, Mason.
Yeah.
I mean, it really does. I like Penn State, and I like what I saw this past, conference championship, but the strengths of SMU directly match up with the weaknesses of this Penn State team. And so, and then it doesn't work out that way for Penn State. Like offensively, they want to run the football. SMU's good at defending the run. So it's really strength on weakness for SMU in every conceivable category here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I'm not going to say that Penn State's wrongfully favored in this game, right? I think that they're rightfully favored, but it's important to point out that matchup wise, there are some opportunities here for SMU to exploit the matchup. In particular, like you said, SMU's done a great job against the run. Now, have they faced a team that runs the football as well as Penn State does? I would argue to say no, that they haven't. You could say Clemson, but I don't think that Phil Maffa was 100% in the game that they played this past week. I think that's pretty fair to say. I think he's got he's running on E after a long season, running the football 30 times a game, at least that's conceivably what he's been doing all season. But nonetheless, SMU's defense I think is good enough up front to challenge Penn State. I'm concerned about them on the back end, knowing that Penn State has done a better job at passing the football this season. I'm wondering who's gonna match up with Warren. I don't know if SMU has a guy that can really match up with Warren one-on-one. I think that you're going to have to bracket him. And what does that open up for Penn State? Something should be there, right? Whether it's running back coming out of the backfield or if you've got Perbula in there, does it open up a running lane for Perbula to get some yards with his legs? I'm not sure. Something should be open for Penn State's offense, though, and that's what kind of leads me to think that Penn State will win this football game. But I'm with you, Mark. I like SMU. I think that this is going to be one of those games, once again, similar to the Minnesota game, where SMU comes out early with some heavy hitters They've got a good scripted first drive, good scripted second drive. All of a sudden, they're up like 14-3, and you're thinking, man, is SMU about to pull off this upset? Which they could if everything goes well for the entirety of this game. I just think that Penn State has more dudes that are going to lean on SMU throughout the entirety of the football game. They get the running game going, find some ways to get Tyler Warren involved, and maybe you see a little bit of Bo Pribula as well. And Penn State wins it later in the game. Is kind of the way I see this unfolding. I think that Rhett Lashley we'll have a few more gray hairs after this one because I do think that SMU is going to be competitive. They're going to be the team is going to come in with a ton of hope in this football game, but playing on the road, playing in an environment that is colder than probably anything that most of these guys have played in throughout their career for most of it. I think that does play a factor here for that team coming up from Texas. But yeah, ultimately, I like Kevin Jennings a lot. I think that he could be a problem. I mean, on the other side of the football, you think going into this football game, you're going to be watching the running backs, and it's going to be a game that is highlighted by the running backs and what really I would say all three of them do. Speaking about Allen and Singleton for Penn State and Brashard Smith for SMU. I think that it's a given that there's going to be some success in the run game. I think that both teams end up with around 100 yards, 100 to 150 yards on the ground. I like the defenses enough to say that I think that team total wise, those teams are going to be kept under 150 yards. But to me, at that point, it comes down to the quarterback play. What does Kevin Jennings provide, not just with his legs, but with his arms? And does he have the playmakers around him to exploit this Penn State defense? I think I have more certainty in the playmakers for Penn State right now. Really like what Harrison has been doing at wide receiver. I didn't think he was going to play last week, and he ends up going. Was a little bit of a factor, I think, in that football game, considering his status. And then on top of that, of course, Tyler Warren, who is one of the best playmakers in the playoffs. Because of those two players, really, or the skill players for Penn State as a whole, I'm going to lean with Penn State on this one. Again, not ready to give a score prediction yet. When we do our final preview, we'll give our score predictions and kind of give an official prediction on the game. But right now, I'm leaning Penn State. Again, it's the playmakers for me on the offensive side that get it done for the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, I hear you. Right now, I'm certainly favoring SMU plus the points in this one, but I think Penn State certainly is the right side of this thing as far as picking, straight up here. We'll revisit this one here in a few days, and we'll have a little bit more in depth stats and things like that. And we hope that you guys will join us for that. Thank you for watching the First and Long College Football Show. All right, guys, and last thing we were just gonna kind of finish up on, and John DeSoy says beer is catching up with me. I hear you, brother. That's what I'm talking about. They're watching Thursday night football, Mason, and they're watching the First and Long College Football Show, some NFL Thursday night football, and drinking some beer. I mean, these are our type of people right here. I don't care what corner of this country you're from. I can get down with that, no doubt. Fan of any team, I can get down with that. We were just going to talk about transfer portal a little bit, guys. Is there anything that's caught
before we get to that, just real quick, I want to know what your thoughts are on Bill Belichick and him going to North Carolina now. Now that it's official, we know he's going to North Carolina. I want to know your thoughts, Mark, and I want to know your thoughts, listeners, in the comment section. I'm extremely intrigued by this, but I'm like cautiously optimistic in a way. But anyways, I'm asking you the question. What's your thought on this?
My initial thought is I hope he has a really big staff in place to be able to handle the ins and outs of recruiting these kids. And I mean, because that's what it's going to boil down to. I mean, it's a talent acquisition sport more now than ever, and I think that's kind of what prompts a decision such as this one to hire a guy like Bill Belichick. I feel like they feel he must have some kind of plan on paper that they feel like is achievable and sustainable. Um, as far as acquiring talent, North Carolina's a hotbed. I mean, there's some great college football players that come out of North Carolina, and I think North Carolina as a whole is a sleeping giant because NIL wise, they can gear up and buy some players. There's no doubt about that. But there's not a foundation of a winning football team there. There's not a winning DNA. We talked about Georgia earlier today and how, Georgia has kind of willed themselves to victory in some of these games. There's not any of that DNA at North Carolina right now. So it's going to be a full revamp. So in mind, I think this is a 2-year thing at least, right? Before North Carolina is going to be really relevant. And you know, I don't know. I question the longevity of this play. It is this a stopgap? Is this a 3-year stopgap? Is this just the best available option right now? I think there's a little bit of that goes into this decision, but I'm just as curious as all you guys are on how this works out. I don't. There's not a long history of decorated Super Bowl champion head coaches dropping down to the college ranks and just killing it. I mean, there's a few, but it's never been like multiple Super Bowl champions. Like
Yeah.
so.
I saw a tweet by Danny Cannell, notable SEC hater, and he said number of Super Bowl championships in the ACC 6, in the SEC 0. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, that's cherry picking a stat right there. Um, I mean, so we'll see. I mean, like I said, there's so much work that needs to be done at North Carolina at this point. Um, I would assume that he probably tries to bring his son in over there.
Yeah, well, that was in his contract, was that when he leaves, his son is going to be the new head coach. So this is very much like a play to get his, to get his son. Which now, okay, it's weird. It's not a good look for, and I don't know why I'm blanking on his name. Is it Steve Belichick?
Yeah, it is.
It is Steve. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, I was Googling his name and I just typed in Steve. Like, I just Googled Steve randomly. That's funny. Yeah, I was hoping Google would just know. Like, it's always listening, right?
Seriously.
But anyway, so yeah, he's gonna have the job. He's the coach in waiting, essentially. Now, my understanding is he's actually already interviewed for a few college head coaching positions, none as high as North Carolina necessarily, but he's definitely on the radar of a lot of ADs. The deal was a 5-year deal for Bill Belichick, and at that point, I think he would be 77, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's 72 right now. So, whether or not he goes all 5 years, I would say I'd be willing to bet he doesn't. But I'm excited for it. I think that there really is a potential if and we saw it happen with Dion, right? Dion goes to Colorado. The allure of the character of Dion brought a lot of talent with him. I mean, that and some NIL, but North Carolina has already said that they're going to bolster the NIL program from $4 million a year to $20 million a year.
They've
which
got big donors.
yeah, which that's a big difference. And North Carolina is a hotbed for talent. Right now, the state of North Carolina high school in the high school ranks is a great hotbed for defensive line and running backs. Occasionally, you get a quarterback, good wide receivers, linebackers. There's some talent in that state that you can go get, and then couple that with the DM, what is it, the DMV area, and if you can win those two areas, I think that North Carolina could find themselves being another school like Indiana that's not just a basketball school anymore. And I trust that Belichick would be able to get the most out of those guys in a short period of time. I think that Belichick would do best in 4 years with a class that he brings in to transforming those guys and then cherry picking some guys throughout the transfer portal. But I'm with you, Mark. This isn't going to be an instant fix. This isn't. I mean, this is kind of like Deion taking over Colorado in a lot of ways. A little bit more of an infrastructure in place with North Carolina, but ultimately, I think this is at least a 2 year turnaround, and probably year three. I'm thinking 2027. I guess it would be that season would be the one that I'm circling, and saying, where are we at this point? Are we on the college football playoff bubble? Because at that point, if you're going all in on the Belichick's, you better be in the top 12 by year three, probably year four. I would say for sure.
Just a
And I'm
family
not
of
saying that
college.
they are for sure going to be there. I'm saying if you're North Carolina and the AD, you want some returns, right? And by year four, I'm thinking you need to be there for sure by that time.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. I'm not so, I'm not sold on it quite yet, but you know, crazier things have happened. I mean, Dion had some success this year at Colorado, and I didn't predict that to happen. So, um, who's to say that I feel like Colorado geographically is in a lot worse location than where North Carolina is, right? And we talked about the resources they're in place. There's that if you don't know, if you're not from the southeast, North Carolina is a big financial community. Lots, I mean, and finance stuff doesn't. There's not an industry that makes more millionaires, right? There is a ton of donors that come through the North Carolina university system there and Chapel Hill, and they got some money. They're a bunch of financial advisors and things like that. They got a lot of money. Um, Pretty much the whole city of Charlotte is nothing but financial buildings. Um, Bank of America Stadium, go figure. Um, all right, well, I just wanted to kind of mention the transfer portal. I had some of this stuff pulled up. I hope I didn't exit out of it. Here it is. Um, the first thing that pops into my brain whenever I look through this transfer portal, guys, is holy cow, there's a lot of wide receivers available. I mean, there is a bunch of really good wide receivers available. Eric Singleton Jr. from Georgia Tech is at the top of that list. Um, as a Georgia Bulldog, you look down the road there in Atlanta, which is, just basically Athens Jr., right? And you think, well, we need to go get that guy. Um, I would love to have somebody like Eric Singleton as a Georgia Bulldog fan, but Deuce Robinson, another guy transferring out of Southern Cal, and they have him classified as a wide receiver coming out of high school. He was a tight end. I feel like that would be a huge gift for a team like Georgia. But just going through some of these, I mean, both of the Kentucky wide receivers, Dane Key and Barry and Brown, both of those guys are in the portal. Nick Anderson from Oklahoma. I mean, these are like the best wide receivers on these teams. I mean, some really 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 big names here. Jaheim Otis, not a wide receiver, obviously a defensive lineman. He is going to be going over to Colorado. It looks like Ole Miss picks up an offensive lineman from Arkansas. Here's one that really kind of caught my eye. Other than Kevin Concepcion from NC State, obviously he caught my eye at wide receiver position. I see his name here, but Williams Nwaneri, no Nwaneri, whatever,
And Winery,
Nwaneri. Yeah, I mean, Missouri literally changed state laws to get this guy. I mean, and he literally he didn't contribute anything, did he?
no.
Um, at all, and took that paycheck and he left. You know that
This
that's
was the guy that you saw Eli Drinkwitz wrapped up in some other coach's arms, like he was on when he committed. I don't know why I remember this, but I was watching the commitment live, and I saw Eli Drinkwitz jump into like the offensive line coach's arms and wrap his legs around him, like he was so giddy about getting this guy. It was pretty weird, but yeah, now it looks like he's going to Nebraska.
yeah, the alpha nerd. Um, Look, I mean that's a big boost for Nebraska, who needed a big boost. Needed some positive momentum going on. Um, Barry and Brown looks like he's going to be headed to LSU. I see that Peanut Butter Posse was talking about him. Peanut Butter Posse in the comment section says Barry and Brown is a liability. Look, I mean the offense in general at Kentucky was a liability last year, so I'm not ready to pin any one thing on anybody. Um, Barry and Brown has got potential. Is he the total package and cultivated to be a first round NFL draft pick or something? No, no, not at all. Um, but I think he can definitely contribute, and he's going into a pool of wide receivers over there at LSU that are pretty doggone good. Um, one of these guys that popped out to me, Mason, just looking, was Max Clare. This is a guy that not a lot of people are going to pay a lot of attention to, but this was the best player on Purdue's team at the tight end position, hands down, no doubt about it. One of the better tight ends in the Big Ten, and that's saying a lot. I would say certainly top three in the Big Ten. Um, Max Clare is going to be a big pickup for somebody this year. Um,
I agree.
what do you make of the Malik Murphy thing? Why? What is the deal? I saw that Duke has already gotten another quarterback, and I can't. Forgive me, I
Yeah,
can't
it was
remember.
Darian Mensah from the Tulane quarterback that was
Right.
a hot commodity on the market. Um,
So what do you
I
make of that? That just seems crazy to me.
and I'm having trouble finding it. Remind me where Murphy ended up transferring to because he's
It
already
doesn't.
decided, right?
He's undecided. It looks like.
Okay, I
They
think
don't
he.
have
So
a.
I think there was a crystal ball showing him to Auburn. If you look at On3 site, and maybe that's what I was thinking of, which is a landing spot that we said would have fit for him before he decided to go to Duke. Like we were saying that he would make a lot of sense under Hugh Freeze's system, and Hugh Freeze just didn't really want to go after a quarterback for whatever reason. And of course, he's regretting that decision now. Um, I I think if he does go to Auburn, that's a hell of a fit. Um, he's. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I didn't watch a ton of Duke football. I'm not going to sit here and shoot smoke up your ass and tell you I did, but he's a guy who's got the tools, and is a physical guy at 6'5", 230. I think he I think he reminds people of Cam Newton. Excuse me, in some ways of Cam Newton, and I think obviously attaching him to the Auburn brand in a Hugh Freeze system would make a ton of sense. And but I as far as motivation for leaving Duke, I don't necessarily get that.
Yeah, I didn't fully understand that one either. Bear Alexander is in the transfer portal again. It's funny you see all these return, repeat offenders here, or I guess for lack of better words. But Bear Alexander's back in the transfer portal again. If you need somebody to come play 3 or 4 games and quit, um, one that kind of surprised me a little bit, Mason. I guess it doesn't surprise me a ton, but the timing of it more is what kind of surprised me. Jonte Cook transferring out of Texas, as Texas is obviously going into the playoffs. Got a guy like Jonte Cook that has decided, you know what, I'm done. And I think he got injured, right? Because I saw the last he had played was like at the end of September. So he must have got some kind of injury, or he got sat out just outright. And but he's not going to provide any depth for Texas, as he is in the transfer portal at this point. You got a guy like Julian Humphrey from Georgia that did the same thing. So it's not unique to Texas, but it was something that kind of popped out to me on paper. Um, There's just so many good wide receivers, Mason. Dazon Stribling, you remember him? That was the guy from Oklahoma State, one of their really good wide receivers.
Mm, yep.
Just stuck on a piece of crap offense, a piece of crap team that Oklahoma State was this season, which really didn't even make any sense. Um, that he's going to be a huge pickup for somebody. I mean, another guy that I would love to see the Georgia Bulldogs go after, no doubt about it. Just an absolute threat out there. Lots of good wide receivers in this portal right now.
Yeah, lots of good wide receivers. A couple of other really big names that I'm seeing is I'm looking at Princewell Umanmielen, which is different, not the same player as Prince Lee U, who's been playing for Ole Miss. Prince Will was really effective for Nebraska, and now it's looking like he's going to go join Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin there. I think that Princely, the older brother, is going to be declared for the draft, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sure that hasn't been decided or publicly announced or anything like that, but I would think that he has or he's eligible to declare if he would like. And then Nick Anderson, the OU wide receiver. I don't know if you mentioned him, Mark. That's one that I'm looking at. A lot of quarterbacks too. I mean, if you're a team needing a transfer quarterback, you got options. You got the Cal quarterback Mendoza. You've got Miller Moss, who offers a ton of experience. Malik Murphy's, a guy that we mentioned, but he's someone if you feel comfortable with who you've got, but want to bring in a little bit of competition, I think that Malik Murphy is a guy that you bring in, knowing that there's a ceiling for Malik that not a lot of athletes can hit at the quarterback position. That's kind of what you're getting out of him. Connor Wegman, he's actually already committed to Houston. I think that Houston's getting an upgrade in Connor Wegman, and it should be an opportunity for him to kind of spread his wings a little bit more in a different type of offense that I think will fit him a little bit more than what he had before with the new coordinator coming in. But a lot of players. CJ Daniels is a guy from LSU, wide receiver. I'm hearing that he's being linked to Georgia. He's actually from the Georgia area. It's so tough, and we're not gonna be these reporters like Mark mentioned that come on here and talk about transfer portal and where these guys are going. We don't have these guys' cell numbers or anything like that. We can't give you any bit more than what some of these other sites are doing. So we're not going to try to. But what we like to do is talk about it just like Mark and I would talk about it in person. I think it's very interesting. College football fans are interested in this type of stuff. And as these players are committing to programs, that's when we really want to start talking about it. I know, Mark, you and I had talked about Bear Alexander kind of wanting to come back to Georgia, and I'm hearing a little bit more rumors kind of swelling that he is definitely interested. And I don't know how interested or motivated Georgia is. Apparently, it sounds like both sides kind of should have done things differently when he left Georgia. So kind of both sides were at fault in a lot of ways. And, there's at least potential for him to come in on kind of a no scholarship, NIL only type of package there.
Yeah.
And Georgia needs it. They definitely need some defensive linemen. But from my understanding, Bears camp seems to think that he needs to play at a place like Georgia and feels that Georgia got the best out of him. And, more than USC, obviously, but more than any other program can provide, playing for a team like Georgia would get the best out of him and moving him on to the NFL. So maybe a little bit more of a mature approach from him.
Come play for free.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You made your Southern Cal money. Come on out and come on back to Athens, and we'll get you in the first round of the NFL draft.
Well, how can you be more of a mercenary than coming to play for a team and not being put on scholarship, being paid only, and not having the perks and incentives that scholarship players have. I think that would be kind of hilarious in some ways, or ironic.
Carly Kuka, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Says I dig your show. Balanced, thoughtful, and thorough. Just finding it now, but keep it up. I'll be watching. Great stuff, fellas. Go Ducks. Well, I hate that you just found us, but I got good news. We ain't going anywhere. So we will be here anytime you want to tune in. Good luck to your Ducks this college football playoff, and we hope that we'll see you around the channel. Um, thanks again for tuning in, and that goes for all of you guys. I certainly do appreciate you guys coming and tuning in. I think I'm about ready to wrap it up. Wouldn't you say so, Mason?
I think so. We're
It
at a
was
nice clean 11 o'clock
Yeah,
East
that
time.
sounds good. You guys have been super entertaining in the comment section. Everybody's on one tonight. I hope everybody enjoys their end of their Thursday night football, the end of their beers. We appreciate you coming and hanging out with us. And if you haven't done it yet, hit that like button on the way out for us real quick. It helps us out a ton. And we will see you guys really, really soon here on the First and Long College Football Show. Till then, I'm Marcus. That's Mason. See you around.